The sound of Diane's designer heels clicking against the marble floor of my father's. No, my foyer was like nails on a chalkboard. She'd called this emergency family meeting less than 24 hours after we'd put Dad in the ground. The funeral flowers weren't even wilted yet. I know this is difficult for everyone, Diane said, smoothing her black Armani dress as she sat at the head of the dining table, Dad's seat. But Charles would have wanted us to sort out the estate quickly. My younger sister Emma shot me a look across the table. We both knew exactly what sorting out meant to Diane. She'd been Dad's wife for all of 18 months, his third marriage after our mom passed away 10 years ago. Diane was 38 to Dad's 65 when they married. You do the math. The reading of the will is scheduled for next Friday, I said evenly. I think we should wait until then. Diane's perfectly Botoxed face didn't move, but her eyes narrowed. James, I was Charles's wife. I've been managing this household for nearly 2 years. There's no reason we can't start discussing how things will proceed. By managing, she meant redecorating Dad's colonial mansion to look like a Miami nightclub owner's fever dream and hiring staff who reported only to her. Dad had been too sick with cancer to notice or care. With all due respect, Emma chimed in, her voice soft but firm. Dad's lawyer specifically asked us to wait until the official reading. Diane waved a manicured hand dismissively. Lawyers always say that. But we're family, were we? The woman sitting across from us had somehow convinced our dad to marry her after only 6 months of dating, right after his diagnosis became terminal. The prenup Dad's previous divorce had taught him to insist on had mysteriously disappeared from his files. His longtime lawyer had been replaced by someone from Diane's social circle. Charles and I discussed what would happen after he was gone. Diane continued, dabbing at non-existent tears. He wanted me to be taken care of, to maintain my lifestyle. This house, the summer place in the Hamptons, the investment accounts. He meant for me to have security. I felt my blood pressure rising, but kept my face neutral. Dad had built his real estate empire from nothing, working 16-hour days while Mom raised us. Emma and I had both joined the business after college, helping expand it further. Dad had always promised the company would be ours someday. I'm sure Dad made arrangements for everyone, I said carefully. Of course, Diane nodded. I'm sure he left you children something nice. Maybe the vacation cabin in Vermont? You always loved that place. The cabin was a 3-bedroom A-frame worth maybe 1/10 of the Hamptons house. Emma's knuckles were white around her water glass. Actually, I said, reaching into my briefcase, there are some documents I think we should discuss before next week. Diane's smile froze. What documents? Just some paperwork Dad asked me to handle last year. About the trust. The color drained from Diane's face. What trust? I slid a folder across the table. The Charles Remington Family Trust. The one that owns everything. Diane's immaculately manicured nails trembled slightly as she flipped through the trust documents. I watched her face carefully, confusion, then disbelief, followed by barely concealed rage. This can't be right, she said, her voice tight. Charles never mentioned any trust to me. Dad established it 5 years ago, I explained calmly. After his second divorce from Karen. He was quite determined not to make the same mistakes again. Emma nodded. He told us it was the smartest business decision he ever made. The trust was elegant in its simplicity. All of Dad's assets, the mansion, the vacation properties, his majority stake in Remington real estate holdings, the investment portfolios, everything, had been transferred into the Charles Remington Family Trust years before Diane had ever sashayed into his life. Dad had remained the primary beneficiary during his lifetime, with Emma and me named as successor trustees. But we're married, Diane insisted, her composure cracking. Community property laws don't apply to assets already in trust before the marriage, I finished for her. Dad's lawyer made sure of that. The prenup you conveniently lost was actually just a courtesy document. It wouldn't have mattered either way. Diane stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. This is ridiculous. I'm calling Theodore right now. Theodore Green, the lawyer friend of hers who had somehow become Dad's attorney in the last months of his life. Feel free, Emma said, her voice gentler than mine, but no less firm. But Theodore has known about the trust all along. Dad may have been sick, but he wasn't stupid. He kept Theodore in the dark about certain things. Diane's perfect facade was crumbling by the second. So what are you saying? That I get nothing? After caring for your father through his illness? I exchanged a glance with Emma. We both knew caring had consisted primarily of hiring nurses while Diane continued her lunch dates and spa appointments. Not nothing, I clarified. Dad amended the trust 8 months ago. You're entitled to remain in the guest house for 1 year, and there's a cash settlement of $250,000. Diane looked like she'd been slapped. The guest house, $250,000? That's insulting. It's generous considering the circumstances, Emma countered. Dad knew exactly what he was doing. Diane's eyes narrowed dangerously. What circumstances? I pulled out my phone and pushed play on a saved video. Dad's face appeared on screen, gaunt from chemotherapy, but his eyes clear and determined. If you're watching this, he said, then Diane is contesting my wishes. I want to make it clear that I am of sound mind. I married Diane believing her feelings were genuine, but I've discovered evidence suggesting otherwise. The video continued, showing Dad explaining how he'd hired a private investigator who documented Diane's meetings with Theodore, discussing how to manipulate Dad's estate planning, along with text messages to a younger man Diane had been seeing on the side. When the video ended, Diane stood frozen, her perfect mask completely shattered. You have until the end of the month to move your things to the guest house, I said quietly. After that, Emma and I are putting this place on the market. Diane's voice was barely audible. Charles wouldn't do this to me. Emma smiled sadly. Dad always said, trust but verify. You might want to ask Theodore why he never warned you about any of this. Diane grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door, but turned back for one final shot. This isn't over. I'll contest the trust, claim undue influence. You can't just cut me out. Actually, I said, standing up, we can. And there's something else you should know. What your father never told you, Diane hissed, suddenly regaining her composure, is that I'm pregnant with his child. The bombshell landed in the room like a grenade. Emma gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. I felt the blood drain from my face as I struggled to process this new information. Dad had been gravely ill during their entire marriage, barely able to leave his bed in the final months. Was this even possible? That's impossible, I managed to say. Dad was on heavy medications. The doctors said. Doctors don't know everything. Diane cut in, a triumphant gleam in her eye. Life finds a way. And Charles's child, my baby, has rights to this estate that your precious trust can't override. Emma and I exchanged glances. This changed everything, if it was true. A biological child of Dad's would indeed have certain rights, trust or no trust. You'll need to prove paternity, I said carefully, trying to recover my footing. Gladly, Diane smirked, laying a hand on her still flat stomach. And when I do, I'll be appointed the child's guardian and trustee of their portion of the estate. Which means I'll be staying right here in this house, not some guest house, until my child comes of age. The calculation was clear in her eyes. 18 years of control over a substantial portion of Dad's fortune. My mind raced, trying to figure out our next move. If that's true, Emma said slowly, then of course we'll make appropriate arrangements for our half-sibling. Family is family. I nodded in agreement, though my gut was screaming that something was off. We'll have our lawyers contact yours to establish a proper paternity test protocol. Diane's smirk faltered slightly. I don't see why that's necessary so soon. I'm barely 8 weeks along. Standard procedure, I replied smoothly. For the protection of all parties, including your child. The doorbell rang, interrupting our standoff. Emma went to answer it, returning moments later with a distinguished older man in a tailored suit. I recognized him immediately as Walter Kingsley, Dad's longtime friend and attorney before Diane had pushed for the switch to Theodore. Ms. Remington, Mr. Remington. Walter nodded to us, then turned to Diane. Mrs. Remington, I apologize for the intrusion, but I was specifically instructed by Charles to attend this meeting. Diane's eyes widened. What meeting? This was a private family discussion. Yes, Walter agreed. And according to Charles's final instructions, I'm to be present for it. He placed his leather briefcase on the table and removed a sealed envelope. He asked me to deliver this to all of you, together, today. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside, written in Dad's familiar handwriting. My dear children and Diane, if Walter is reading this, then the scenario I anticipated has come to pass. Diane has likely just claimed to be carrying my child. This is biologically impossible. 2 months before my diagnosis, I had a vasectomy. Medical records confirming this are enclosed. Diane, I knew about your plans with Theodore. I knew about Michael, your lover. I let you believe you were outmaneuvering a dying old man because I wanted to see how far you would go. Now you know the truth. Everything was protected long before you arrived. James and Emma, forgive an old man's games. The real estate company has always been yours. The trust ensures it stays that way. As for the houses, boats, and other assets, sell what you don't want. Life is too short for maintaining appearances. With love and no regrets. Dad. I looked up from the letter to see Diane's face contort with rage and desperation. He's lying, she sputtered. This is a setup. Walter silently handed me another document. Dad's medical records confirming the vasectomy, dated 18 months before he met Diane. I believe, I said quietly, standing up, that you should pack your things. You have 24 hours to leave the premises, not until the end of the month. The cash settlement is now revoked, as per the trust's fraud provisions that you triggered with your false paternity claim. Diane looked from me to Emma to Walter, searching for any leverage, any angle. Finding none, she grabbed her designer purse and headed for the door. You haven't seen the last of me, she threatened. Actually, Emma replied softly, I believe we have. After the front door slammed shut, the three of us sat in silence for a moment. Then Walter pulled out a bottle of Dad's favorite scotch and 3 glasses. Your father, he said with a sad smile as he poured, always did enjoy the last word.